So we'll just have to, I think we'll let Ridgway time take its sweet time, and we'll give it a few minutes. So those of you, I only see 2 members of the public, well, 3 including Trish. Welcome, Trish.
Trish is actually a partner because she's representing Region 10.
That's right. Well, just to say that it is 6 o'clock, but we're going to give it a few more minutes until give people a chance to sign on.
I'm curious, has anyone heard from Jen Coates recently?
Yeah. I got a text message from her fairly recently. She sounds like she's doing good. They've been doing the national parks circuit in recent months, all the way up to Glacier.
Oh, wow.
She said there have been some changes. I guess Kiko finally passed away, their dog that was getting quite elderly. Trying to find her.
Yay, Ashley made it.
Welcome, Ashley. Yeah, she said they were in Oregon. I hope they're not in Oregon now with all the fires up there, but spent most of the summer going through Utah, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, and Washington. Finally got to Yellowstone, Tetons, Glacier, and San Juan Islands. Anyway, sounds like she's doing pretty good. I'm realizing I never replied to this. I need to as well. There's your hubby.
Yeah.
Jim.
Yeah, he's not home yet. He must be on his phone. So there you go. He'll want to use the phone.
So again, just for those of you who are trickling in, it is after 6, I realize, but we still only have a handful of people other than town staff and elected officials on here. So I'm going to give it a few more minutes before we officially kick it off. Hopefully we got more people coming. Have any of you been on a Zoom call where they have background music yet?
No.
The of course, is it Catherine with DCI? Catherine.
Mm-hmm.
What's her last name? Anyway.
Corral.
They've been hosting these webinars about the Gallagher Amendment and the be on the ballot this fall. And their Zoom meetings have, and it's got to be Catherine, it's all like R&B and Motown kind of hold music that's going on at the beginning and the end of the meeting. It's pretty fun.
I was going to make it a surprise, but we could pipe in some NFL fan noise into the Zoom at appropriate times.
Have you seen that? Have you done that before?
No, I haven't done it, but they're piping in crowd noise onto the TV broadcasts.
Right.
Because the stadiums are empty, and it's bizarre.
Yeah.
And from what I've heard, most people think it's pretty annoying.
I would imagine.
Yeah.
Sort of like the canned laughter used to be in TV shows.
Yeah. So I've been getting a lot of canned laughter lately. My daughters, who are now 8 and just about 6, have really taken a shine to the Golden Girls. And so they're watching all these old Golden Girls episodes, which is they're really funny. It holds up, but like so much of the humor is just going right over their head, and they just think Sophia's a riot because all she does is like poke fun at people. They don't understand like 3/4 of what's happening. But
So
it's like, if we eat dessert and do everything right, can we watch a Golden Girls?
so that's
Sure.
like Betty White and
Yeah, Rue McClanahan and B. Arthur and
B. Arthur, right? Right. Oh my
oh
God,
god, I can't think of her name now. Who played Sophia? But yeah, no, those
that's
poor,
hilarious.
poor ladies in the house in Miami and very 80s wardrobes. It's quite the thing.
What next?
Yeah.
Well, I think maybe we should get going maybe once Rich comes on. He was the last one who I admitted.
Okay, sounds like we should get started. So I'd just like to welcome everybody to this Space to Create update meeting and give you a little introduction background for any of you who are relatively new to this. It's really, every time we have a meeting about this, I'm just really struck by how monumental this project is for the town of Ridgway and really Uriah County as a whole, the region to a certain extent. I was going back through my notes and email history and all, and we've been at this for almost 5 years. First applied to be the first, like the Space to Create project possibility, I guess I'd say, program has been around since 2015, and it was originally a partnership between the Colorado Creative Industries, which is the parent, the state organization that's the parent of the Creative District program. Betcher Foundation was a huge partner, DOLA, Colorado Department of Local Affairs, and then there were some other philanthropic organizations like El Pomar and Deidre, help me out. There was at least one other.
Betcher.
Betcher I mentioned. Was there another one but El Pomar? I can't remember.
Gates Family Foundation.
Gates Family Foundation, that's the one. Anyway, it came out of the really the background of it was the Creative District program, and really Tim Schultz, who was the head of Betcher at the time, coming from rural northern Colorado, was just really conscious of how important the Creative District program was becoming to rural communities all over the state. And he went to the governor, Hickenlooper at the time, and said, we should try and figure out a program that we could use to create workforce housing for creatives all over rural Colorado. And essentially that's the very short and sweet version of how the Space to Create program was created. The partnership that was doing it chose Trinidad as the pilot project without any competition to choose that community. And Ridgway was part of the first, the next round where it was actually the first competitive competition to get the Space to Create project. And that was back in 2016. We had a number of meetings, public meetings that got the public and the community interested in what it could do for us in terms of workforce housing, and the whole partnership with a stakeholder group was created, made up of the partners that are partners with the town of Ridgway in doing this. Again, Deidre, I'll need a little help with that. The partners are San Miguel Power, Telluride Foundation, Region 10,
Ridgway Chautauqua Society in Weehawken.
the Ridgway Chautauqua Society in Weehawken, which is basically Charbonneau and Weehawken. And then, is there one more?
There was originally the Uriah County Housing Advisory Committee.
Right. Which is kind of in limbo right now. But there was a stakeholder group made up of representatives from each of those organizations, and then some members of the public and a couple of elected officials, town staff. Ended up being about a dozen people. There were a number of stakeholder meetings that helped put together our sort of request for being selected. It came down to very lengthy process where, if I remember correctly, it was Durango and Mancus and Ridgway that were kind of the finalists. I believe Durango dropped out, and it was down to just Mancus and Ridgway, and in the end, Ridgway was chosen. And in the 4 years since then, 4 years plus, we've had just an incredibly long drawn out process of trying to figure out how to get it done, designing the project. ArtSpace is represented here tonight as our development partner, and they have a architecture firm they work with on their projects, and Matthew Meyer is here representing is it HHL Associates? Matt? I think that's right. So they're going to present here in a minute, but just wanted to, kind of give the history. It's been the last few years. We had to go through 2 rounds of funding requests with the Colorado Housing and Finance Authority, CHAFA, to get some low-income housing tax credits. First round, we were not selected. Second round this spring, we were selected. So that was a major hurdle of getting potential financing in place. There's still gap financing to be found, but and then of course over the last few years the design process of the actual structure, and we've gone through several iterations. At one point it was 27 or 28 units. Now it's 30 units of deed restricted workforce housing, and Matthew and Andrew will go into all the details of that. But just want to stress how really incredible this project is for the town, and how amazing it will be that hopefully we'll break ground next spring and have 30 units online in a beautiful new building in the next couple of years. I wanted to make sure I mentioned that the Andrew and Matt will give their presentation. At the end of that, we'll take questions. If you're on a phone, to raise your hand, you have to hit *9, or if you're on a smartphone, you can just find the participants list, and you should see a button that says raise hand there. Hopefully you can figure it out. I know this is always a challenge sometimes, but at the end of the process, the end of the presentation, you'll have to raise your hand to ask a question or make a comment. I want to make it clear at the outset that we're far enough down the road here that we're not looking for design input, because it's far enough along that we can't make changes to the look and feel of the building. There will be potential possibility to make some slight changes to like colors and things like that, but we're not looking for that kind of input tonight. We're looking for what we're looking to give you, the public, is many more details than we've had in the past about the actual potential cost to rent these units, what the thing will actually look like based on the architectural work that's been conducted so far. We've got, there's actually a contractor, Stryker Construction out of Junction is the construction partner. So there's a lot going on, and that's what we're here to update you on. The meeting is being recorded, so it will be posted on the town website afterwards. So if anybody that wants to see the recording, they can get the link there. I think Deidre might also send it out by email to anyone who's asked to be on the Space to Create update email list. But with that, I think I'll turn it over to Andrew to do his presentation.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. I wish I was there, frankly, but circumstances being what they are, we're making the best with what we can do. I'm really happy to be, presenting this information. As the mayor said, we want to make sure folks are, up to speed on what's going on, because there's a lot behind the scenes that, folks aren't seeing because we're not under construction. So there's a lot of work that's going on, a lot of good work to advance the project that isn't visible to the public. So I think it's always important that as much information as we can share on a timely basis to keep people informed and engaged is always helpful. And also charting the timeline in front of us so that folks are aware of what's coming next, when we might see shovels in the ground, when we might see the building complete, and when people might be able to begin. So I'm going to share my screen. I've got some slides I'll take us through. And then, as Mayor said, we'll welcome questions at the end, and we'll just hop right in. Okay. So as I said, the agenda, we're going to do an update on the timeline, sort of how we got into where we are, and then what we have coming up looking forward. We're going to go through briefly some of the design refinement that the mayor mentioned at the top of the agenda, how we sort of arrived at where we are now, what the building looks like. Talk a little bit about some of the community space programming and some space that won't be for residential housing, but will still be part of the project. And we want to, make sure there's opportunities to solicit some uses of that. And I think, really some of the nuts and bolts about what the qualification and requirements and the limitations are on the resident occupancy, how we've structured that to try and capture as many folks who might be eligible and needing of this housing. And then obviously at the end, we'll take your questions. So I will try and be brief, but without being hurried. So I'm happy to go back and visit on slides during questions if folks need or want to see something again. So just diving right into the timeline. As the mayor mentioned, we did submit a successful tax credit application in February of this year. Those awards were announced in May, and that is substantially 60% of the construction costs are paid for once we have that tax credit award. So that is really a point at which we say, this is a deal that's real. Let's start actually diving into the really nitty gritty of design, started looking at site investigation, putting up all those pieces that need to fold into the ultimate design. So that began in earnest in about June of this year. We started doing our site investigations. So we do, subsoil geotechnical, we do survey updates, make sure we know what, the building's going to sit on and how we're going to build it and all those sorts of things. And that's ongoing to today. We are anticipating that our actual permit application set of drawings will go in within the next month or so. And that will be a pretty well cooked set of drawings. All the things necessary to meet code will be reviewed and confirmed that they're in place. And we'll also release that to Stryker Construction, who we're working with as the general contractor, who will update pricing and make sure sort of the trades are in line with our expectations. While we're still at a point, if we need to, we can adjust construction materials or cost implications of what might be in the design. But that's really all focused on getting us through due diligence, getting all of our funding secured, getting contracts written and partnership agreements and all those pieces put together. And that's all behind the scenes kind of things, not the sort of thing you would ever participate in or expect to see, but all the necessary elements of who's going to own what and whose dollars come in when and all of that, so that we have everything cooked and ready to go when we actually close on that deal structure, which we're targeting for the first quarter of 2021. And that's when we'll begin construction. So we'll be fully funded at that point. We'll have a construction number that's and a contract value, and off we'll go. We're expecting it's going to be about 12 months of construction. So you would expect the first quarter of 2022, we'd be complete and looking forward to opening the doors to the residential units and that community space to start seeing it activated, occupied, and folks moving in. Backing up a little bit from that first quarter of 2022, we would start doing some really formal informational meetings with prospective tenants in particular. This is a low-income housing tax credit financed project, and that big mouthful of words comes with a lot of regulations. And the key takeaway I would want you to leave with is that we make this housing artificially less expensive than the market would support. And in doing so, we are only allowed to serve households that are at or below a certain income level that's set by the government. And then the rent for each of those units is set at an affordable level. Later on in the presentation, I'll actually have some examples of what those levels are. But what that means is we have to do verifications of employment and assets and things like that. So there's a lot of paperwork that goes along with it. And we always want to make sure that anyone who could be eligible has their best opportunity to get into this housing, and they're not in a position where they miss out because they didn't have 2 years worth of their taxes in hand or something like that, or they couldn't track down an old bank statement or something like that. We want to make sure everyone is aware of what the expectations and the documentation might be, ask questions about what's it like to live here, who can live here, when can we move in, what are the rents going to be. All that we'll want to have out well in advance of when we're done with construction, so that folks are ready to move in as quickly as possible when we're done. So look for more of those sort of granular, nitty gritty, informational meetings in the year or so to come. But in leading up to that, we're going to dive into some discussion of, what are we building and how did we get to here? So I've put up an image here of a design that we are not doing. That's intentional. That's to show one of the early concepts that we presented to both public and the stakeholder groups to get input from this community about, it's not just housing, but what's it going to look like? What really are the desirable elements? It's new construction, but it's in a historic district. It's going to be a new construction building that's larger than others that have been built, in the past. And how do you fit that into a neighborhood, maximizing what we can do to create housing and create that space and still be complementary and not dominate the neighborhood. So took a lot of differing takes on that. As the mayor mentioned, we had as few as 26 units at one point. We are looking at upwards of 31 at one point. We're balancing that with materials and cost, working with the Planning Commission and the guidance we got related to zoning and density to get to a design that we're really maximizing impact without, driving too much more than what the project needs to do. So, round and round. We went. So there's varying concepts. Again, these are not what we ended up building. And some of you who might be on the call might have also attended some meetings we had in person where we had boards up in town hall of these varying concepts and actually solicited that input. And folks were putting Post-it notes on these boards, like, I like this, or I don't like that, or take this part and put it over here, or really love that. We took all of that to heart and said, what of that can we do to balance the building, the site, maximizing units and all those pieces, and moved on to what we have as a final balance, which I'll walk through in a little more detail, but it's 30 units of housing. It's a mix of 1-bedroom units and 2-bedroom units. There are 31 stalls of parking on site, integrated primarily to the backside and a little bit underneath a portion of the building. There will be about 2,000 square feet of community space, and this is a non-residential, non-income bound space that will be available for the community to use, administered by the town, and that'll be right off of Clinton. And we'll walk through the exterior renderings and kind of show you what that is, and we've got some potential interior views of that as well. We're looking at a mix of materials. There was a lot of discussion about not wanting to see sort of a monolithic standalone building that didn't look like the town, which was, built in sections, and one building comes and one goes down and they were built up together. So really trying to reflect that without sort of mimicking or mocking a style or a particular design aesthetic, but trying to, respond to that and still take the project forward. So I hope you'll see some of that. And the spaces we've designed to be flexible. So particularly on the residential, we might have one tenant who is, potter, and they have a potting wheel in their living room. And we might have another tenant who's a writer and they just have a desk in their bathroom. And, these spaces can be used for a variety of things. So that's reflected in our design, and the interior and exterior spaces are intended to sort of flow through. So we wanted to make this a project that's in the community and also invites the community in. So rather than listen to me talk about words, let's look at some pictures. So just starting with the floor plans, this is what the first floor will look like. You can see this dark blue on the lower right. That is actually our residential entry lobby. There will be a gallery sort of space available for our residents to use. There'll be office space for the manager. The purple is mechanical, so that's, all the building systems will need a place to live. They'll be there. A little bit of shared circulation space and some bathrooms. And then this brown box is that 2,000 square feet of community space. And you'll see in a little more detail on a future slide, but this actually opens up right out onto the street, and there's overhead doors that will really make that an opening space that folks will be invited into. And then on the left there are 2 1-bedroom units and 1 2-bedroom unit, and those are fully ADA accessible units located on the first floor. Going up from there, the second and third floor look pretty similar. We've got this L-shaped building with a mix of 1 and 2-bedroom units. The darker green are those 1-bedroom units. The 2 bedrooms are in that sort of lighter turquoise. The Little brown boxes are actually storage space that we're going to make available for residents to use. We anticipate that there'll be a lot of folks who have, bikes they want to store, or skis or snowshoes, or, just stuff that they don't necessarily need on a day-to-day basis, but they might have. And given the orientation of the building, the corridor, it made a good use of that space to make that available to our residents. Another amenity that we'll have is this little sort of brown box on the bottom there. That's a roof deck that will actually project out over the entry to that community space on the first floor. And then going up from there, similarly, 1s and 2 bedrooms, and then in this lower right-hand corner, another roof deck on the 3rd floor. We've got an image that will show what we expect that space might look like. So looking at the exteriors, I always want to pause, when we go into these are rendered images. They look really cool and they look really refined and final. There's still tweaks that are happening. There are material selections that'll happen. This is one sort of snapshot of that perspective, but it's really, I think, a good representation of what we think the building will look like when it's done. And that is looking at the building from the corner of Clinton and Laura. So as I mentioned, these are along Laura here. Those are those 2 1-bedroom units, and the 1 2-bedroom unit. Those are ADA accessible. Those are right there on the corner. That's that first deck on 2nd floor over the community space in the middle there. And then there's that other deck is down here. So as we go through these slides, we're going to sort of go in a circle around the building on the exterior. So as we move around down Laura, as you go to the north across the site, there's an alley, and then it steps down to single-family homes going north of there. Similarly, across Laura, we have single-family homes, and the neighborhood height and density really decreases pretty rapidly. So we wanted to be sensitive to that in the design, and so you can see we've sort of stepped back the facade of the building some, dropped the roof and put a little slope to it to not be so prominent against those neighboring buildings and homes, but still, have a articulated and cool-looking building, and Matt can talk some more about that too. But this space underneath here, this is actually a driveway entrance to the parking at the rear of the building. So as we, again, move around that corner, we're down in the alley now, looking sort of to the southwest. And you can see that it's the parking lot at the rear of the building there. The residential units primarily above, and then the alley on the left-hand side abuts up against Kate's place, which as we come around on that corner, you can see, again, the entry to the community space here. And then this space would be the resident entrance. And that's also where that lobby gallery space would be located. The roof deck above, and then this large white corner of the building, we're intentionally leaving as sort of a blank canvas. And we hope that that can be used for murals or art installations or projections, a variety of things that we can be intentionally creating that art as part of this space and activating it, but not in a way that we're going to come up with, but in a way that we hope that either guest artists or the residents themselves or the community of Ridgway would activate. So really trying to be, complementary to the neighborhood, but still being, an arts project. We are part of Space to Create, and we want it to be clear that this is a creative space. So moving up to there, this is the 3rd floor deck with a nice sunrise coming up. Really trying to just be mindful that, this is a beautiful setting and the mountains are a huge part of Ridgway and that culture, and wanting to make that a part of our resident experience as well. So this will be a deck space that can be used by our residents when they have sort of open studios or they are having events. That can be space that is activated and the public is also welcomed into. So really, just a nice, simple amenity, but a nice and I think good use of that space and that vantage point. Moving into the units themselves, we have one representative unit. This is a 1-bedroom, and just to kind of give a sense of how the units lay out, we have full-size modern kitchens, full-size appliances, refrigerator, range, sink, all of that. But to make these spaces as flexible as we can, we shove those kitchens to the side as much as possible. And now this is rendered with furnishings and a table, but there's also spaces you can see at the rear where we have an easel set up. So illustrating that it's really intended through its finishes and its layout to be usable for not just living, but also a workspace. As we move around, this is around the corner into what would be the bedroom space of that unit. And you can see this sort of wall here. That's actually sort of a large pocket door. So we intend for that to be slid open or left closed. And that could be for the resident to have some privacy, slide it to the closed position, or leave it open and have it more of a sort of a studio layout. So really trying to be mindful of flexibility in the space, and respecting that some people are going to want it truly to be a bedroom, and others might want to have it as a dance space or a variety of different things. Also really trying to emphasize light coming into the unit, so maximizing windows as much as we can. We've got French doors on the units to open up and bring in the outside. We've got French balconies shown so that we can have a safe sort of way to bring in fresh air and not have to be so reliant on artificial means, and really sort of bring that outside in to the units as well. The community space. This is, again, on first floor. So this is right off of Clinton. This is that overhang again with that roof deck above. And this is a perspective looking to the space. And again, I'm going to caution folks that this is shown as one possibility of a finished space, just to illustrate that it can be used and what it might look like. But there's a lot of different ways this could be approached in either flexible or more programmed ways. But really wanted to convey this intention of the open door. That's a garage door that can be closed, obviously, in winter and inclement weather, but also opened up for people to come and go, or if there's an event, people can stream through it really, really easily. And it's right at grade, so folks can just walk right in and really be welcomed and invited into that space. So just a little different perspective there. You can see the interior. This is, again, shown with a variety of tables and chairs, perhaps like a co-working environment, or if there was a pop-up coffee shop or something like that, it could be just a place for people to casually gather. It could be a meeting space. Really a variety of different things can be done here. We've also talked about putting in a accordion wall or a movable wall of some sorts, so the space can be divided. A lot of those conversations are ongoing, and I think there's a lot of opportunity to make this a variety of different things, but we'll need to hone that a little more before we get into construction, so we're not trying to do something later that we didn't think of now that we think is going to be important. So that's definitely some input we're seeking about where there's some needs in the community and what folks would like to see that space used for. And then moving through that space, this green image you're seeing is actually glass at the rear going out into the parking. So you can see there's some ramps and some stairs that provide that accessibility up into both the residential units as well as the rear of this community space. So it really can truly flow through the building or be closed off, depending on what that use might be day to day. So going forward from there, I want to talk a little bit about resident qualifications. And what does it mean to be a resident or an eligible applicant to live in the housing? So don't commit these numbers to memory. They change every year, but I wanted to put them up there to illustrate what we are going to be working within as far as eligibility. So we are committed to providing housing for households at 80% of AMI or below. AMI means area median income. And for Ridgway, that means Ridgway County. So HUD and the federal government does, all their data collection, determines what the average income for Ridgway County is, sets that number, and it's published for every county and statistical area in the country. And from there, they say, if that's the median, if you're at 80% of it, it's below. And then we are also housing folks at 60, 50, 40, and 30. So we've got a variety of affordability. And these would all be the same kinds of units. They wouldn't look different from one to the next, but they would be serving households that are below a variety of levels of income. And it's adjusted by the number of people in that household. So I put up 1, 2, 3, and 4 person income so you can see what those ranges are. And typically a 2-bedroom unit would allow 4 people. So that assumes perhaps 2 cohabitating adults and 2 children. It could be 1 person who qualifies in a 2-bedroom, just depending on your household income and composition. The actual number moves around a little bit. So you can see for a single person at 30%, it's $16,050 a year. But a single person at 80%, it's up to $42,000. So really there's a wide variety of potential for folks to qualify, not just being at a single dollar value. And then moving on from there, the rents then are also set to no more than 30% of that gross income on a monthly basis. So these would be the allowable rents at each of those bedroom types and income levels. So there's a lot of detail to that, and how, you know, incomes are qualified and what goes into it and assets and all that verification. That will be part of those information sessions that'll come, you know, about a year or so from now, where we're really talking about what are the numbers that are current at that time. What do folks need to bring in? I present these so folks have a sense of what the numbers are now. These are 2020 numbers. They'll be republished in 21. They'll be published in 22. But that is sort of the range we'd be looking at now. And how that translates specifically into this project, you can see we've got, you know, 1s and 2 bedroom units, and we've got those income levels for each of those units. So it's not just all the 30% are 1 bedrooms. We've got 2 bedroom 30% units also. Most of the units in the project, 24 of 30, are 1 bedrooms. And a lot of that's simply driven by the size of the lot and the building we could build and trying to maximize units. But we also wanted to make sure we included 2 bedroom units, because we do expect there'll be households that have children, or, you know, might be larger than just 1 or 2 people, trying to make sure we're providing as much variety and as broad a spectrum of income and eligibility as we can within, you know, only 30 units, because we can't solve every housing issue with this one project, but we wanted to really reach out and grab as many as we could. So that just gives a sense of that breakdown. We really try to be, you know, sort of even-handed as we can be, but also ensuring that the project will operate with these rents. So moving on from there, what does it mean as a resident to qualify as, you know, both income, and then, you know, what are the restrictions we place on, you know, the creative sector? Well, the answer is we don't. We really want to be responsive to the creative sector, but there's also housing needs that go beyond that. And the workforce, particularly in Ridgway, and this is, you know, across the state of Colorado and the nation as well, folks can't afford to live where they're working. And that puts stresses on folks in a variety of ways. So we want to serve workforce folks that are at or below those income levels. Really, because of the Space to Create initiative, we want to engage and market to and attract creatives as well. We've designed the spaces to be used by folks that might have a variety of different creative pursuits. We know that there are a lot of creatives who are in Ridgway and want to remain or move into Ridgway, and those opportunities aren't there. You don't have to be a creative, but we certainly think you'll benefit from this project if you are. But we also want to invite folks who want to be part of that, who don't maybe consider themselves a creative in any sort of way, but they want to be part of, you know, this community, and they want to be part of an active element of Ridgway. So those are the sort of, you know, baseline broad categories of folks we're tracking. But it's, you know, it's families, it's singles, it's people who are working in the arts professionally, it's people who are not working the arts at all, but are doing the arts, you know, as a hobby or as a side business, but maybe not earning their primary income from doing a creative pursuit. And we really want to be responsive to the existing creative economy in Ridgway. I mean, you've got a certified creative district. You were selected because of the impact the creative industries have on Ridgway and on your economy. So we're responsive to that. But at the end of the day, we aren't in a position where we are restricting to only allow artists in, or only allow a certain kind of artist. Even in arts-based communities where we have a preference that is actually written into our leasing, we don't define an artist as only one thing. It's not only painters or only dancers. It's any sort of creative pursuit that you're doing that you think qualifies. Probably does. I mean, we've got people who do model trains, and that's their art. We have people who do spoken word. There's nothing tangible to take away from that, because it's just an oral performed art. All of those things would qualify, but they're not a requirement to live in our housing. So we want to make sure that folks who are in need of housing generally are aware and interested in applying. Anyone is welcome and invited to apply, but also we want to make sure that folks who have that creative pursuit or want to be part of that kind of community know about this and are aware of the requirements, and, you know, have their packages ready to go when the application's open, so we can really be responsive to the whole creative Space to Create initiative. So I've gone through my slides, and I can, I don't know, John, do you want me to leave this up in case folks are referencing, or should I stop screen share?
Maybe just like show the elevation, the one from the corner of Laura and Clinton.
Mm-hmm.
Just so we have something nice to look at.
There we go. All right.
Okay. And
Great.
Matt, do you want to add anything, Matt? Deidre, can you unmute him?
Thanks. Thanks, everybody. No, I think, Andrew summarized it pretty well. We've been working on this for a little while now. And we went through a lot of design scenarios and a lot of material choices, a lot of geometries, and there are a couple of core things we wanted to retain. One was daylight, and one was views, and one was fresh air. And so that's why we included these, the little Juliet balconies with the French doors, so that people could, maybe they can't have a deck because of just the geometry of the site, but they can open a door and really experience the outdoors, since it's so important to your community that you are able to do that. And I think the other thing that we tried to think about in designing the building was, we're from Buffalo, so we get what it's like to be in a cold environment. So we've made some deliberate decisions about the skin and about the roofing and the insulation of the building, so that it's really going to be a highly energy efficient building. It should be comfortable year round, whether you're taking advantage of the cross breezes when you can open those doors, or when you need to hunker down because you're getting some heavy snowfalls. We're looking at technical things on these decks and on some of the covered sidewalks, like ice melt systems or infrared heaters and things like that to respond to the environment. So we're trying to do our best to consider all of the variables of the context of being on a relatively steep sloping site for a small parking lot, but it slopes pretty severely as you go down Laura and down the alleys. So we wanted to really take that into consideration about how you go around and circulate around the building. And so if you're on a alley side looking at what would technically be the back of the building, it's not going to feel necessarily like you're looking at the back of a building. And we tried to take all of those kinds of materials and geometries into consideration, while still trying to be respectful to the zoning ordinances and the height restrictions and some of the other setbacks and things like that we need to take into account.
Great. Thanks. I do see a hand up, so Guthrie, somebody can unmute him. Go ahead, Guthrie.
Trying to get him to give him permission to unmute.
They have to to the people who are in the audience, the host has to unmute you, so it'll ask if you are willing to be unmuted. There you go. Go ahead, Guthrie.
Yeah, I had a phone call or two during the presentation, so this may have already been covered, but tenants that are there, how often do they have to re-qualify under the income and asset guidelines?
That's a great question. So the initial qualification is at leasing. From there, it's an annual recertification, but your income is allowed to increase. It's expected that folks' income will fluctuate year to year. So there's 140% you could go up to of your qualified income before you would no longer, quote unquote, qualify for the reduced rent. But that doesn't mean you'd be evicted necessarily. That means if you elected to rent, that would no longer be a qualifying unit, which is sort of technical mumbo jumbo. But I would say to you, it's the big lift is at initial leasing of the unit, and then every year from there, it's like a one-page certification of what your income was that year. And across any of these affordable projects. That's standard practice, but that's really a sort of a minor thing on an annual basis.
Great. Guthrie, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I unmuted myself before. I had a follow-up on that. Then how much notice would just out of curiosity, would a tenant have if they no longer qualified with respect to having to move out or whatever? What are the parameters on that?
Yeah, and so there wouldn't be a required move out if they exceeded that 140%, and that's of their income level at the year they recertify. So typically incomes increase. So if you were at 60% in 1 year, and I'll just make up a number, if it was $60,000 and you qualified that year, if 10 years later you're now making 61,000, that doesn't mean you're over, because the 60% rent level will be qualified at that then current year. So it's actually very infrequent that we're seeing someone who's had that drastic of an increase of income that they would no longer qualify for the unit. And when we do see folks who are over income like that, they typically have already decided to either move on and get a house of their own or market rate apartment. But if they were ever over income like that, it would be determined at that annual recertification. And again, they wouldn't be evicted or removed from the project simply because of exceeding that income. It would have a technical impact on the funding source that paid for the project. That unit wouldn't generate those credits anymore, which it's IRS thick, regulatory stuff. But it's infrequent, and it wouldn't result in someone simply being evicted because their income rose above that level.
Okay, well, what's the impact on the finances of the project then if multiple units go into that category of no longer qualifying?
So it's unlikely and it's infrequent that happens. But what would really, the way the tax credits work is we make a promise to CHFA, the state agency that administers these credits. They're actually federal tax credits, and an investor buys those credits from the project essentially. So they get to claim those credits over a period of 10 years, but they pay us for them up front. So that we use those dollars to build the building. And then we are responsible, and I say we, ArtSpace, as the sponsor and the developer, we promise that we will have qualified households in those units, every unit, every month, every year for those 10 years. And that is how those credits are actually generated that investor then gets to use to offset their income. So if one unit no longer qualified, that would mean that one unit for that year no longer is generating those credits. So it could technically trigger a repayment requirement where the equity that the investor gave us, in year one, some portion of it would no longer be qualified. And that gets written into our agreements. There are a lot of adjusters and ways to cure that. But I've actually never encountered a project that had a significant number of units that happened to that triggered a significant recapture. It does happen, but it's not something where we see very often.
Okay, and who does the risk fall on then if that repayment is triggered?
ArtSpace is the guarantor for the project. So we, as the developer, we've got a track record of having done more than 50 of these projects in, I think, 25 states now. So we have a significant amount of risk that we take on to guarantee to those investors that we will deliver those qualified households for those 10 years, and they'll get their credits and we'll get their dollars. And in exchange for that, they have next to nothing to do with the ongoing day-to-day operations. They get to see the audits every year, but the day-to-day management, the leasing, the programmatic pieces, the partnerships that we forge with the community and with the town of Ridgway, they don't really have anything to do with it. So they're really like a silent investor. They hand the money in, and we get to forward our program. So as a mission-driven nonprofit developer, we take on that mission and take those risks because we know we have the track record to not fall into those positions. But we also put reserves on the project to address those potential needs. We have operating reserves that are built in, leasing reserves. If things start breaking and we need dollars to fix them, we cook that into the budget. So there are a lot of stops that come in before we're really looking at a situation where we'd have to do a repayment. And again, I've yet to see that. I've been 15 years I've been doing this, and I've never encountered a recapture event like that.
Yeah.
It does happen to deals, but it has not ever occurred on ArtSpace's watch.
Sure. Yeah, gotcha. So your organization then retains the ownership on the building?
We have a minority ownership stake because again, the silent partner brings in the dollars, but we have all the control. So it's a 0.1% ownership technically. That allows all those tax benefits to flow through to the investor. But then in year 15, they walk away. The investor, they've taken the benefit of the tax credits over those years. They walk away, and then the building is essentially free and clear to ArtSpace in the community, Ridgway, to typically, because we here have promised to deliver affordability for 45 years, and the tax credit period is only 15 years. So we will be in a position where we want to recapitalize, fix up the building, maintain it in good order, put another round of tax credits or put some other dollars in to do capital improvements, bring it up to speed for 15 years of wear and tear, and keep it going from there. So it'll revert back to us as a nonprofit without having to pay that investor for anything in addition to that.
Thank you.
Thank you for the questions.
Anybody else have a question? Hopefully you know how to raise your hand, and if you're on the computer, open the participant list. There's a little raise hand button. It's usually down the bottom right. If you're on a phone, cell phone, smartphone, *9 raises your hand. I don't see any other hands.
Well, I'll offer, I mean, if someone raise their hand, we can also take follow-up questions by email later. So Deidre, feel free to share my email address when you circulate the link to this recording too. So if folks have questions looking at it later, they can still reach out and have that answered.
Okay, Annie Grogan, go ahead.
Hi, this is actually Astro, Annie's partner, not Annie. But the question was, I'm assuming that the income qualification is based on a pre-tax income. Is that right?
It depends. Some income sources are treated differently, and I'm always hesitant to get too deep into those details. We have folks who are in compliance fields who know it inside and out. It's generally, though, those income limits are gross income. So they, depending on what sources like Social Security, disability income, things like that are treated differently than straight earned income. So again, those are the guidelines. Those are the general pocket. If if I go to, let's go back to that number, just so we can talk about something that's shown. This income limit. Two-person household at 60%, 36,660. If you think you make 36,661, you should still apply, because depending on what is factored in and how they treat each piece of your income, you might still qualify that 60, but you're certainly then going to qualify at that 80% unit. So the numbers move around. It's not necessarily straight the number that's off your W-2. Some folks have multiple W-2s. Some folks, are paid cash, and they'll project income, than they might see in the year. So there's a lot of complexity that goes into what the actual calculation is. And that's where I'll build the thing all day, but I really defer to the other professionals on our team and in the property management field to coach folks through what their incomes might be. And again, when we do those informational sessions, as we get closer to leasing, that is really where we want to get into those details of how do folks know they qualify or think they might, or what should I do to make sure I can qualify, or what if I make too much in this one, could I still apply there? What if those units are left? All those kind of questions come up, and we've heard them all before, and we'll answer them every time. And we want to make sure that no one thinks they can't live here when they actually might be able to. So again, these are the numbers are published currently. They're guidelines. They will move around, but also what income is actually used in that calculation might be different for you than the next person. And it's all set by, frankly, federal regulations that also move around somewhat from year to year. So we always just want to encourage people to think about applying rather than thinking they can't. So I hope that's helpful.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
All right, anyone else? Any other questions?
Or comments.
Comments, questions? And then share tell your friends about the recording. It'll be on the website probably within the next couple days. And we'll also share Andrew's email address so that anybody can reach out to him with questions. You can also email Deidre or myself. Kind of surprised that there aren't any other questions, but these guys have done a great job of putting this together, and we're really excited. At one point earlier this year, I was thinking we might actually get shovels in the ground late this fall, but that's not going to happen now, but it's going to happen early next year, and this thing will be coming up, and we'll have 30 units of a workforce housing coming online soon. So.
And, you know, I want to emphasize too, John, I don't think anyone has said this, that this will be the first low-income housing project that Uray County has ever had. So we are critically in need of this sort of facility, and we're really excited that we're able to make this happen, and that we're working with a nonprofit developer like ArtSpace, who has so much skill doing this all over the country.
Thanks for mentioning that, Deidre. That's a huge deal, and I encourage everyone to check out artspace.org, see what they've been doing for close to 30 years now. They do amazing work, and I'll just stress again that, you know, I think the thing I've heard so many times over the last few years is that, you know, why is this just for artists and creatives? And it's not just for artists and creatives. Anyone that qualifies income-wise can apply, and really what we're looking for more than anything is people who want to be part of a real community building environment and help manage it and help make it a really dynamic success. So, and I also like to stress that, you know, a school teacher may do watercolors in their spare time and sell cards of their watercolors. A town deputy marshal might get a kick out of going to the Reclametals junkyard and getting old auto parts and welding up sculpture out of that. There's so many examples of people who do something creative in their spare time. It may not be how they make their living, but those are creative people. We all do something creative, really. Whether you believe it or not, I'm sure there's something in your life you do that's creative. And everyone could potentially qualify for this based on income, of course, but it's not. I just really want to stress that we need to battle the misconception that this isn't for normal everyday people, it's only for artists. I see another question from Annie's partner, was it Astro?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so maybe this is something to be addressed at the later meetings, but I was wondering how, other than income, how the selection process will work. You know, assuming you have many more applicants than there are units, is it a lottery system after that? Is there some kind of board review where you're assessing on, I guess ordinarily, you know, a landlord assesses on someone's ability to pay, but you know, if there is a board review or some sort of discretionary process and not a lottery, sort of on what qualifications would you guys be selecting?
That's a great question, Astro, and thank you for asking that. So different states and different communities will place different requirements on how we actually do tenant selection. For example, in New York City, we opened a project with 90 units, and there were 90,000 applicants for those units. So that went through a multiple tiered lottery process. And then that community actually had a zip code preference for housing folks who are already in that community. So that's kind of an extreme, you know. Other communities don't have really kind of any requirements about a lottery or any of sort of, you know, system they have in place to order the tenants. So in the absence of any sort of regulatory requirement, we often will just do first come, first serve by application. So when the applications come in, if it's a full and complete application, we'll date and time stamp those as they come in, and we'll go through those and we'll make the pile of the qualified applications. the complete applications. Sometimes they aren't complete. We have to send that one out the door, and then that person has to bring back additional materials or whatever. That's one approach we can take to just, it's fair. If you're interested and you want to, apply, show up early, get your application in the door. But it also is going to be somewhat determined by what that applicant is. If the first applicant in the door qualifies at a 30% rental level, well, we're going to put them in a 30% unit. If they qualify at 50, but there's no more 50 units, they could still live in a 60% unit. So some of it just has to do with what units are available when that particular application comes in at initial lease up. So we've, always strive to be responsive to whatever community we're working in. If there was a strong desire to have a lottery or more randomized approach to selecting those applications, we're happy to take that on. But it's really going to come down to, what is a qualified tenant, by the numbers look like. And then beyond that, we do your standard sort of criminal background check. There's credit check, but we don't have an additional layer we're putting on top of that. The state of Colorado doesn't allow us to have an overt artist preference or a creative preference. Other states have allowed us to do that. But again, as the mayor said, we're really open to all applicants who are in need of housing, and chances are there's some creative element to their work or their leisure pursuits or another member of their family. We talk about you don't have to be a creative to live in arts-based housing. It's true, because a lot of our residents aren't. They're roommates, they're spouses, they are children. You don't have to be, a particular kind of anybody to live in this housing. You need to have a desire to be there and want to actually apply and meet the income qualifications. Really, those are the two major things. We want to see a community that is engaged in the creative pursuits and wants to be part of that kind of vitality. Because some folks aren't going to like it if their neighbor's, playing the drums at 2 a.m. and maybe that neighbor shouldn't be playing the drums at 2 a.m. But those are the sort of things that happen. Some folks are night owls and they're doing their things and they're collaborating. Those sort of organic communities get built by the residents of an arts-based project, and not by me or Matt or anyone else drawing a unit a particular way. That's by the residents interacting. So it's really, folks who want to be part of that are going to be the ones who apply. So that's probably a longer answer than you might have needed or wanted, but I thought I would just share that.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. And I would also like to repeat what I said a minute ago, in that I hope that we can have a process that really emphasizes the fact that we want applicants who really want to be actively involved in the community that lives in this building. Because I think what I'd hate to see, and we'll have to go down the road and see how it works out, but I'd hate to see people who are just, they want to get the cheapest apartment they can get based on their income. They want to close the door and they don't want to be involved in the community and the building at all after that. And I'd really like to see, and I think probably the good news is that Ridgway's made up more of the kind of people who want to be part of the community than want to just a cheap apartment and not have to deal with their neighbors. So we'll see how that plays out, but that's one thought I had. I do see another hand up. John Smith, can we go ahead and unmute John?
Hey there, this is actually Jessica, his wife, but John's here too. Apologies, we couldn't make the earlier start of the meeting, so apologies if this has already been addressed. But we were, it was just mentioned how there might be different dynamics, that unfold as the community starts. That makes me wonder, will there be a central person who sort of manages some of the logistical human aspects of the community?
Yeah, great question. So ArtSpace sort of has a two-pronged approach to that. So we will have professional property management attached to the project, and they will do, all the typical things you would expect a property manager. Mm-hmm. So they'll make sure the snow is shoveled, the trash is taken out. They'll do, rent collections. They'll do tenant intakes, maintenance. They oversee all those like sticks and bricks kinds of operational mm-hmm. elements of the project. But ArtSpace also employs a staff of what we call asset managers. And the asset managers work hand in hand with property management, making sure, what we call an asset, the real estate is functioning as it's supposed to, it's complying with all the promises we made. But those asset managers are really a liaison to our residents as well. So they actively encourage the residents to be producing works and to collaborating and to engage in the ways that each individual community figures out they want to be. And that's initially trying to activate folks and say, this is not like a typical apartment you lived in where if you ask that you want to paint the wall, the landlord says, no, you can't paint the wall. If you do paint the wall, you have to unpaint the wall or pay me to paint the wall later. Our approach is, your unit and the hallways are intended to be canvases, but it's not just your canvas. It's what do your neighbors and residents want to see happen too. Is the guy down the hall, a found object sculptor, and you want to get into some metalworking? Well, then they start doing things together. And then if they decide they want to have an exhibition, those sort of things happen just, serendipitously by the residents interacting. We don't require that. It's something we encourage. We ask that the residents establish committees that will reflect what that particular project. So what the residents of Space to Create Ridgway, what do they want to have in their gallery this month? Do they want to have every other month? Do they want to have, invite some folks in? Who's in charge of that? We don't want one group, just dictating everything. So we encourage there to be these committees of the residents that are organized. We don't require them. We don't oversee them. We don't dictate anything, but we encourage that to happen by the residents to, direct their own spaces. So there's usually like an events committee. So if there's, potlucks are going to happen or someone wants to put on an event, that's driven by the residents. We look to assist in whatever ways we can. Oftentimes it's like, well, can we do this in the space? Like, well, do you want to do it in the space? Because you sure can, So we want to make sure that folks are aware of those opportunities, and then we're hands off in the planning, but we're hands on in helping to facilitate that. So it's really, it's driven by the residents with an assist from ArtSpace, and we've seen some really incredible things come out of our projects across the country. If you've got some time, I would encourage you to look at our website and see sort of the elements that come together from our residents. And the hallways are oftentimes hung with art, top to bottom, floor to ceiling, both ends of the hall, in a variety of different ways. Obviously visual art gets hung pretty easily, paintings and the like, but folks put sculptures in the hall and they, install things on their doors. And we encourage that because that's part of what being in a community like this looks like.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So it sounds like the asset managers, they do deal with practical things, being a bridge between the community members and the property managers. But it also sounds like they're a little bit of a facilitator of sort of the mission a bit.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you.
Sure. Thank you for the question.
Thanks.
There's another question here from Jim Corson.
So I see there's a dog there in the street. Can that dog live with an owner in this property, or do you know that yet?
Typically, we do allow pets. Now, I say that because sometimes there's some restrictions that we need to place on that. Some breeds are not allowed in some jurisdictions. Some breeds are not typically welcomed or allowed by insurance policies. And I'm not naming breeds because I don't necessarily agree with all of that. But we do recognize that a lot of people take comfort and companionship by having animals. So there's usually a limit on how many animals and sometimes the size of that. So like a pound per animal. So maybe not more than 2 dogs at 50 pounds each or something like that. So it depends, but we like to invite the animals in. And folks have parakeets and birds and, parrots and all sorts of things. So it's part of ArtSpace culture to be permissive where we can be, as long as folks are, being thoughtful about it. So that dog I expect in that photo is actually walking home right now, just across the street. So
Very good. Thanks.
Good question. Thanks, Jim. Anyone else have a question?
John, can I just throw out one more comment or observation? This is my 6th ArtSpace, and we've done a bunch of other affordable housing and market rate housing for other developers. And the consistent, I'm not trying to pat myself on the back because it really doesn't have that much to do with our design approach, but the consistent theme, especially because this, as Deidre pointed out, is one of your first affordable housing projects in here, is that there's there's a perception about what affordable housing is, what it's like to live in an affordable housing unit, what the affordable housing does to the community. And in every one of the 5 that I've completed and the others that I've visited, the consistent theme is, whether it's the tenants who've just moved in, or whether it's the public officials in the community, or whether it's the individuals from the state affordable housing authority, they walk in and say, "This is affordable housing? I don't get it. This looks like an apartment I get anywhere else." And it's such a cool place to be. So, we've tried within this compact site to create spaces for people to commune, for people to engage and create and participate in the community and participate in this unique setting of 30 living units. And I would encourage everybody to just embrace that premise that affordable housing really isn't different. It's not any less than any other housing is. And we've been able to work with ArtSpace to do it in a pretty cool and unique way that really does some crazy things to a community once it's done. And we don't know what it's going to do here, because it's always unique to the community, and this is a pretty unique community. But it's happened in every single one that we've been involved with. And I think, to Andrew's point about checking out the ArtSpace, check out all the Facebook pages and the social media pages of all the art spaces. It's pretty remarkable what starts to happen when people just take a different look at, what it's like to live in an affordable housing thing. It's not, it's not what a lot of people think if they're not familiar with it.
Give
Thank you for
some
that, Matt.
examples, Matt. Can you give some examples of what you've seen happen in other communities? Not that it's necessarily going to happen in Ridgway, but
Well,
I just
yeah.
think
Well,
that's
I got 2 quick examples. Well, three quick examples. One is in the in a project we did in Long Island, New York, in Patchogue. It's about 2 hours train ride from New York City, and it's in a pretty modest community, not a little bit bigger than yours. And they have, the Atlantic Ocean and Fire Island and a whole bunch of cool things. They aren't mountains, but it's equally cool. And they have their own premise about what it's like to be, a place in Patchogue, and Patchogue wasn't Buffalo, and Patchogue's not New York City. And, everybody has that own pride of ownership. But literally 2 weeks after we handed over the keys, the community of individuals who leased up the space got organized, gathered together their creative assets, and 30 days after it was open, they had the walls filled. It looked like an art gallery. After they opened. And in PS 109, which is the big one in Spanish Harlem that Andrew was referring to, it was about 3 months after it opened that a singer, a little cabaret singer who ended up qualifying for this thing, and her apartment building burned down literally a month before this place was finished, and she qualified and managed to move in. She started a singing class for all the kids that lived in the residence. And they started, and it just was a remarkable thing to watch. And then in El Paso, down in Texas, they really rallied around the public art concept of murals and graffiti and all other mechanisms of public art, and rallied around a big mural wall that we created for them on a parking lot side of the building that we could have just as easily made it brick or put some wood paneling on, but we left it as a big blank wall. And they were able to commission this artist in the southern Texas area to create this topical image that created a whole bunch of spin, a new business opened up in the community space there that, did printing and sold paint devices for public, for mural and spray paint and things like that. So again, it was a couple of months after it opened, and you don't normally see that in a housing project. People move in and okay, hi Joe, hi Sally, you do your thing. It's just different things happen here, and I'm always astounded by it. So that's all.
Thanks, Matt, for sharing those. Deidre, if I could, I would like to offer just another example. It's a little bit closer to Ridgway's backyard, and I would encourage you to visit or look at what's going on in Trinidad, because that is the first Space to Create demonstration project. No affordable housing had been built in Trinidad in more than 30 years. They hadn't seen any, multifamily construction. They had seen population decreases, and they're on the upswing now. They're increasing in population. They're seeing more investment. They brought us in. We're activating their main street, again being responsive to the needs of that community. But beyond just our housing project, once we were selected, we're actually in the ground, and that building's they're complete. We're starting leasing up there now, and it's in that successful sort of end stage. What else you're seeing now in Trinidad is a community that's realizing they don't have to wait for someone to do it for them. They are now realizing they can do it themselves. So I think the acquisition of Fisher's Peak and the soon-to-be new state park that's coming in, that has all come since Space to Create came to Trinidad, and the city leadership and staff recognize that they can do more, they can do things, and they just have to put their minds to it. So it can really be impactful in ways outside of the building and the residents who live there, and extend into the community. And that's really sort of a core tenet of ArtSpace and our involvement in communities, is trying to be catalytic in whatever form that needs to take. Sometimes it's a blighted former industrial neighborhood, and we're turning a warehouse into housing to bring safety and activity back to a portion of a city. Sometimes it's simply responding to intense housing need and a desire to foster a creative community. And that's really more the story of Ridgway. And so what impacts that will have downstream, we don't yet know, but we have a good idea that they'll be positive and frankly surprising in what form they take here. So I'll leave it at that.
Great. I see. Thanks, Andrew. I see another hand raise from Astro. Is it Rogan?
Yes. Quick question. Is there a minimum income?
There does need to be some form of income to pay rent. There is not a hard and fast set standard from the federal government of what minimum is. Some folks don't have a lot of papered income, but they have income, and that can sometimes be a difficulty in proving that. So again, that can be a subtlety in qualifying, but we oftentimes see if folks have too little income, and maybe they're at that 30% income level, they might actually qualify for rental subsidy, like a Section 8 voucher, which would then be used to pay their rent. And actually, segue there, folks that have a Section 8 voucher can use it to pay rent in affordable housing. So it's the two are not exclusive, but this is also not a Section 8 project. So sometimes there's confusion as to what those two are, and are they the same or are they different? If folks have those resources available to them, they are eligible to use them to supplement their rent here. And that can be Social Security income, that can be veterans benefits. A variety of those sources can be used in an affordable housing project as well. So that again is something that can be teased out a little bit more in some of those information sessions, but there's a variety of different ways. Each household is looked at individually for what their income, both sources are, but the total amount that's used for the qualification is. So I can't really give like the to the dime answer on that, but if you have no income, it probably would be a question of, are you actually able to pay rent, or is it going to turn into an eviction action? But I would want to leave that to the compliance and the property management folk to really walk through what a process would be there. And we're just not quite at that point in developing our leasing documents.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks for the question. All right. Any other questions? Great presentation, guys. This is just so exciting. I love that we're at this point in the process after all this time, of course,
Yeah.
and some great work has been done. We're still working on ways to fill the gap funding, and just excited about Stryker working with Matt and the development team to be getting close to actually presenting construction drawings to town, get the building permit in the works, and getting shovels in the ground, hopefully early next year. So
I think we're all looking forward to that.
Mhm.
yes, what a celebration we're gonna have. Seeing no more questions, I guess I'll close this out here just with a big thank you to everyone who showed up. Of course, always a huge thank you to Andrew and Matt and the rest of your teams supporting your efforts. Can't thank you guys enough. Also, big thanks to town staff, Deidre and Preston and Shay, for all the hard work they've done. And again, just thank you all for coming. Share the link, tell your friends about being able to watch this on from a link. It's going to be on YouTube, but the link will be on the town website. And unless there's anything else, I'll just say thank you all for coming, and we'll draw it to a close.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, everyone. Good night, y'all.
Good night. Take care.
You too. Stay warm, stay dry.